Welcome, geeks, to another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're back. We had a weekend off, and now we're back to the last uh, show of the season of the year. And I was quickly, my slides are going to be a bit messed up because for some reason, PowerPoint lost all my changes for this talk, so I quickly quickly fixed the first slide before this started, but the rest of the slides are not completely correct, so we're just gonna have to live with it. Luckily, it's the last show of the year. And speaking of that, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you all have fun, exciting holiday plans, and be safe because I want you back next year to watch another episode of the show that Simon and I work really hard to put on. But anyway, my guest today is Simon Painter. I first met Simon in August this year when he and I were speaking at the Copenhagen Developers Festival, and then I recently saw him again in Lithuania last month. And I enjoyed, not only did I enjoy going to Simon's talk about functional programming in C Sharp, which I wasn't really sure you could do, but I really liked getting to know him and talking to him. And he's from the UK. And anyway, I'm inviting a lot of the speakers from these conferences onto the show because the two conferences I spoke at live this year, I met a lot of amazing speakers and a lot of new people. And I'm going to have them on the show, starting with Simon, and then we'll have more coming on at the beginning of the year. So I'm already booked until April. So things are going good as far as finding speakers. So we'll see how the slides go because they're not correct. Yeah, I don't want to talk about build stuff. So surviving the technical interview, I hope you go get a copy of my latest book on how to get you through the technical interview portion of the interview, because if you can't get through that, you're not getting a job, right? So, and also, unfortunately, this is layoff season. It started happening last month. It seems to be happening almost every day in the news. I hear tech companies laying off people. So unfortunately, this happens every year. Don't be surprised. And as long as I can remember working as an adult, this happens every year. So make sure you're prepared by getting a copy of the book and reading it a couple times to make sure you're prepared for the interview, because the book is really more about getting prepared. Because when I interview software engineers, and I've interviewed hundreds of them, the number one thing I see software engineers not doing correctly is not taking time to prepare properly for the interview and for that specific position. So this book gives you a lot of helpful tips, not only being interviewed tons of times myself, especially being a contractor, but also interviewing people and also being a hiring manager. So I have the whole gamut of experience, I guess, and it's all in the book. So I hope you go pick up a copy. So the interview, the picture's going to be wrong. Sorry, while I read this, so maybe I should just skip that part. And I'm going to read Simon's bio. Simon's been working as a software developer since 2007 in various industries around the UK, including government, retail, manufacturing. Though he's been hacking around the computer code since he was old enough to read Daddy's copy of ZX Spectrum's basic coding manual. All right, I never even read that. Simon's also a Microsoft MVP and public speaker who has appeared in user groups, IT conferences around the world to talk about .NET development techniques. He lives in a small town with his wife and children in the UK. Welcome, Simon.
Can you? Oh, and I'm here. Hello. How's everybody doing?
Hey, sorry about your intro slide there.
I've regenerated.
Office has been giving me a hell of a time lately, and I'm convinced it's a problem with Office and OneDrive. because I keep most of my, important documents, including, the deck for my show in OneDrive. And, the last couple months I've been having terrible problems where, I save something, whether it's PowerPoint or Word. I come back the next day and the changes aren't there, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Please.
You know,
It's fine. It's fine. Here I am to introduce. We all know who I am, hopefully, at this point. So
yeah.
it's fine.
So I'm glad to see you again. Like I said, I really enjoyed your talk at Build Stuff about C Sharp functional programming, which we're going to get to talk about today. So if anybody has any questions for Simon, especially how you do functional programming in C Sharp, please start putting in your questions now so we can get them answered, and I'll get them answered as soon as I can bring them up with Simon. But so what are your plans for the holidays, Simon?
Ooh, good question. Well, I've got another week of work yet, so I'm working up until the day. Unfortunately, I have to burn up a lot of my leave to be able to go to those lovely conferences that we mentioned. So I tend to be a bit short when it comes to the end of the year. So but generally, I have two small children. They're currently 8 and 10, and so get all. Santa is going to have to be very busy to get everything ready for Christmas morning, of course, and then kind of a week off to chill and take it easy, play some daft board games, all the usual sorts of things.
Yeah.
There's
No, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Oh, I still remember when my kids were your kids' age, and because they're adults. Well, they're supposed to be adults now, but I remember staying up late every Christmas Eve wrapping all the presents, and what a job that is. I can tell you, it's a lot.
Although I'm 41 years old and I'm still not convinced that I'm an adult yet. I'm starting to wonder, you're supposed to be wise and all-knowing as a parent and an adult. I'm wondering when I'm going to get that. When does it come in the post? When does it come out? When does it happen?
I don't know, because I'm still waiting too. So I have grandkids now.
I'm basically a teenager with wrinkles.
Yeah, I think a lot of software engineers are kind of like that. But in a lot of ways, that's good because it makes us, at least for me, have a better imagination and things like that. Because as software developers, we need one, right? Because we have to dream up stuff from zeros and ones, and and that's the part, at least in software engineering, I enjoy the most is dreaming up something from scratch that really, really, really helps people, somehow in their work life or personal life.
Absolutely. I've actually argued for many, many years that not only is software engineering a creative endeavor, but also when you look at it, the opposite is also true. When you look at, like painters or writers or anything like that, they're technical professions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not to say that they're not also creative. Of course they are, but then they are, and so are we, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But if you look at the process of creating a very beautiful painting, there's a whole load of series of technical steps that have to be undergone before you get there. That artist first has to understand anatomy, has to understand color theory, has to understand perspective, 1, 2, and 3 line perspective, and all this sort of thing. And even then, they've got to start with sketches and construction lines, and there's a lot to it. And it's an incredibly technical profession. Not denigrating it; it's amazing. But yeah, I would say that in many ways we are in the same line of work. It's just that we almost exclusively work for a company that wants to purchase our work and our skills, whereas a lot of artists are more likely to have the option to work for themselves.
Right.
Other than that.
Yeah, work for themselves, and then they usually don't work full time unless they're like a graphic artist or something like that. Definitely does, but I'm thinking more like the painters and things like that, But yeah, it's and that's we were talking about music before, the show started, and that's why I play music. I practice play music every weekend, right? All the graphic arts you see in the show or my website or in my books or anything, that's all me. You know, I don't pay anybody to do any of that stuff. Might not be the best graphic arts in the world, but I do it. You know, I've been working, you know, I've been doing video since I was we were talking about middle school. I was doing video in middle school, you know, when the tape was this big, you know, before, you know, computers, and tape was this big and you had to splice it together to make edits and things like that. And, you know, I also helped to put on, I don't know if we did this weekly or daily, but we did a school like news little program thing. And yeah, so I've been doing photography since I could work a camera, and you know, now I'm an award-winning photographer, and you know, but all that to me is all about the whole creative process, and that's why
Sure.
you know, we need that in you know, this world. I think we need more creative people, to tell you the truth, at the apps that I use, at least.
Sure. No, I completely agree. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I've always had a pet theory that creativity and intelligence are just two manifestations of the same thing. Intelligence is the ability to take two disparate facts and combine them to a third fact. And that's really a version of the creative process as well. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong on this, and I'm sure people will probably prove me wrong, but I've always felt that to be intelligent necessarily means to be creative.
Yeah.
That's my pet theory anyway.
Yeah. Then we're both intelligent, is what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Now my theory falls apart.
Yeah. So, you live in the UK. What time is it there?
It is 6:15 in the evening.
6:15.
Yeah, as we were saying just now, my children are currently downstairs watching Home Alone for the umpteenth time. I made them some hot chocolate and snuck up while no one was looking to come and talk to yourself.
Yeah.
So
Well-
we'll be going down for evening meal in a minute.
Yeah, I think last month they gave Macaulay Culkin a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Did they?
You know? Yeah. Well, the Hollywood Walk of Fame is one of those places where you get a star when your career's over. So
Oh.
it's like musicians. It's like musicians playing in Vegas. When you play in Vegas, yeah, your career's done.
Is that right? Oh, blimey.
Well, it's starting from Elvis on. I mean, look, you know, all these you know, because Vegas doesn't want to pay. I mean, to have a current person like, let's say, Taylor Swift playing Vegas would be just so expensive for the casinos that they don't want to do it. You know, they want to pay for somebody who's cheaper, right?
Sure. No,
So that's why you get, you know, older stars that have been around 20, 30 plus years, right? Playing there. You rarely ever get anybody like new and current, you know, playing at the casinos, at least. Yeah.
That would explain why we've now got sort of stars for Black Sabbath and stuff like that down the streets of Birmingham.
Yeah.
This is our best attempt at doing a similar thing, although we have a limited number of Birmingham stars.
Yeah. Like right now, well, you might get mad at me, but right now U2 is playing a residency there. They've been there for a while, and I think the last shows they're playing is in early January, I think. But they're playing at that new. Have you seen that new? They call it the Sphere.
Oh,
Where
is
it's
this that
just
thing that sort of?
The massive LED screen and it's round. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen like video clips of it. Isn't it where they've done a project like faces on it and
Yeah,
stuff like that?
But
I've seen
they
videos.
do the same thing on the inside, and so when U2 is playing, the whole wall is LED screen. It's too big because it makes the band look like this big, right? And the seating in that, I looked at the seating, and unless I'm on the floor, I don't think I want to go there because the seating is so steep that almost immediately all you're going to be seeing is the top of their heads, right?
Right. Now, this might be some form of blasphemy, but that's almost more of U2 than I really care to see. They can sort of cover the rest of them up too if they like, and maybe turn the. Yeah, I'm being a little mean. They put in a few good tunes, but I'm not the biggest of fans.
I
I'm more into
always,
my.
yeah, I always want to see them at least once. There's some bands on my bucket list. Like I got to see the Stones once, and U2's on that list. But every time and even Paul McCartney's on that list. But every time they
Oh
come
wow.
around, to a local stadium show here locally, it's so expensive. I just can't. But seeing U2 in Vegas is crazy expensive. It's like
Yes, I
over
bet.
$1,000 for, yeah, yeah.
Is that just your ticket? It's just
Well,
$1,000 to get yourself in the door if you're already in Vegas somehow.
the only thing I could find, and it's something that U2 was posting, was a ticket hotel package. It's like $1,500 for a ticket hotel package for one person.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I'll
That's
wait for
that's
the
quite expensive.
DVD. That's the way I am these days. I'll wait for the DVD.
Well, at least you've got the comfort of your own living room, and you can pop to the toilet whenever you need to pop to the
Yeah,
toilet, and
I mean,
and the beer
most
will
of
be a
us
lot
have.
cheaper.
Yeah, most of us have really good, home theaters and big
Mm.
TVs, and
Yeah, that was one of our pandemic investments. We've got, well, it's pretty big, let's say. We just thought we're going to be stuck in the house for God knows how long, so we're going to have a really nice telly now.
yeah. A couple years ago, I finally broke down and bought a 4K, and
Wow,
that was,
it's worth it.
yeah, it's worth it. Yeah, yeah.
It is. The only thing I'm missing now is I want a 7.1 system, but that needs a lot more planning than telly. I mean, with the telly, you just sort of dump it on your unit, and the telly's ready basically. If you put a few plugs in the back, but your 7.1 or
Yeah,
5.1 or whatever, you've got to find ways to position that around your living room, behind you on each corner of the room and all that, and you
yeah,
need to have wires trailing around, or else you've got to must pay out and get yourself a Bluetooth one or something like that. So that's
yeah.
a
But
lot more
you
planning, but
you
that's worth
lose
it.
too much quality with Bluetooth.
Yeah.
I would never want to do Bluetooth speakers. The one thing I do wish, the one thing I've always had in the back of my head is if I ever get the carpet replaced, then I'm going to put down wires underneath the carpet, right, for the back speakers, right? Because
Nice.
that's the only thing that's kind of a pain is the back speakers.
That's a pretty solid idea. We're actually in a new build, and we're kicking ourselves that we didn't tell the builders that we wanted stuff like that in, because they probably could have popped it in the walls,
Oh yeah, that would have been
and
easy for them. Yeah, yeah.
done now. But yeah, it's on the list. It's on the short list of stuff that we want to do in the future, because I'm a massive film buff, so
Yeah,
I would love to be able to have a really good. And I think sound is an important part
it
of the
is.
film. We've got a
Especially with
sound bar, so
the bass cube, the
yeah,
bass,
yeah,
like a 10-inch or 8-inch bass speaker really makes a
yeah.
huge difference in the sound. Yeah,
Yeah, we got a sound bar and a subwoofer.
yeah, yeah,
So we're kind of it's all right. It's fine.
yeah,
It's good
yeah,
enough that it doesn't feel bad, but I would still love a really good surround system,
yeah.
because surround sound sounds brilliant.
Oh yeah, so much better. Yeah, especially when,
Mm.
like, I've been watching. I recently joined Disney Plus, and so I've been watching a lot of Star Wars and things like that. And
Hmm.
it's really great to hear that surround sound with the, laser, the lightsabers going off and stuff like that. You can really hear it pretty well.
Yeah, although the downside of having a big telly is I'm a big fan of old British science fiction
Hmm.
series. So
Hmm.
Doctor Who being one of the obvious examples. Anyone who's ever read a copy of my book here will know that I'm quite a fan of Doctor Who. Um, it doesn't look good on the big screen, and I'm talking 70s Doctor
Yeah.
Who.
Oh yeah.
When it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
filmed on video, and
Yeah.
not like now where it's all 4K HD and all that. No, the
Yeah.
old stuff. Everyone ends up looking a little bit like a cartoon character, because you've taken like something like this and stretched it right out, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
shame. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah. I, I really like the recent episode 3 of the new Doctor Who with that actor who played Doogie Howser. What's his name?
Well, we've lost me now. I don't know who Doogie Howser
Um,
is.
yeah, it's probably before your time. What's his name? Simon, can you look it up? The guy who was on the latest Doctor. Doctor Who
Neil
episode?
Neil Patrick Harris.
Oh, Neil Patrick Harris. Yes. I
Okay, who
really
does he-
I really like his acting when he's playing a character like he played on that show.
Okay. I know who you mean now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was really good.
He was really
Yeah,
good.
I was surprised to find out he was American. I know he does an American accent in parts of it,
Yeah.
but he does so many accents. It's very hard to pin. If you don't know him, and you did, but I didn't, it's kind of hard to pin down where actually he's coming from.
Yeah.
His English accent is really quite surprisingly good.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
like him. He was in a series that only I'm forgetting the name of it, but the series only lasted 2 seasons, where he was playing all these different characters, kind of like he played in that Doctor Who. And I'm upset they canceled it because it was like the best thing I've ever seen him in. And they canceled it after 2 seasons, unfortunately. So anyway, let's get to coding. I talk about code. So functional programming in C#. What do you want to talk about that?
Right. Yes, I want to talk about that because I'll once again point out I have a book out on this subject. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's it's vanishing.
Dang green screen.
No. That's the no expense spared special effects. There we go. We get a bit of a look at it there.
It's the light version.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, only the author's remainder copies, like I've got, do that. So the one you get if you order it will just stay disappointingly solid. So you'll have to read it. Not the only book on the subject. I must also give credit to Enrico Buonanno, who wrote an incredibly good book that was one of the main sources of material for me. So I have to give him credit. But functional programming. So should I first explain what functional programming even is?
Yes.
I don't know. Righty-ho. So functional programming is one of the two major programming paradigms. The one that everyone tends to learn, of course, is OOP. That is object-oriented programming. That's a form of imperative programming. So, okay, moving back a step. There are many families of programming paradigms. A paradigm being a style of programming, as opposed to a framework or a NuGet package or whatever. It's a style with which we program. And imperative is the form where you sort of imagine a little pointer going around in your code. Go here, go here, go here. There's a loop. Go round the loop a few times. Carry on. Oh, there's an if. Maybe we go here or we jump here. That's imperative style. We've got the little robot marching through our program, being told where to go. Everything is precisely mapped out. We start with an empty object, and I'm going to tell you precisely how to stuff this object full of stuff, when to stuff it, and so on. We're very concerned with the precise order of operations and all the minutiae. That's imperative programming, and OOP is the most popular member of that family. Whereas functional belongs to another family of paradigms, declarative programming.
Right.
So folks may already have been doing declarative programming for many years because SQL is declarative programming. So this is a little different to imperative. One of the several differences being that we're not concerned with things like order of operations. We're not concerned with the detail of precisely how and when things are done. And you tend to start at the end. You tend to be more interested in what do I want at the end, and I'll give you all the detail. And now operating environment can go away and do the work for me. So if you think about an SQL statement, then you don't write that code in the order that it's executed.
Right.
Quite often, not always, but often, the select statement's the last thing that gets executed. And there's no special reason why you should care about that. It's not important. In a declarative style of programming, we don't care what the order of operations is. We just describe what we want, and then we leave the detail to the environment. And so that's how functional works. I sometimes refer to it as results-oriented programming. You're more interested in what we want and less interested in how precisely we did it. Right. It's almost like moving up to a fourth-gen language. But the kicker in this case is that this is not new at all. This is actually really, really old. The origins of functional programming go all the way back to the late 1800s.
Wow.
It's really old. It's been around for a long time. Arguably the first functional language was created in the 1960s. It was Lisp. Was it Lisp?
Yeah.
It was John McCarthy, I think it was, that put that one together. So it's been around for absolutely ages. And it's not, as I say, it's not a framework, it's a style of programming, which is why you can do it in nearly any programming language under the sun, probably with some exceptions. Pretty much name the language, and you'll probably find there's a book on the subject called This Language, How to Do Functional Programming, or Functional Programming in This Language, or whatever. There's functional programming in C++, I've seen that around. There's functional programming in Python. JavaScript for sure. I mean, JavaScript does everything and supports everything because JavaScript is everything, except when it's an empty array or a function or not a number or negative infinity, or except when it is, because JavaScript. JavaScript is wild.
Yes, it is.
But yes.
So the one question I thought of while you're giving that description is, so you go around, at conferences talking about functional programming in C#.
Yep.
As opposed to talking about F#. Why is that?
Oh, there's always one. Every well, there's only you here, so it had to be you, I suppose. But guaranteed, almost every event I go to, somebody asks me this question. Yeah. And it's a valid question, which is why there's about 2 pages of my book dedicated to this exact question. So, F#. So, for anyone who's not aware, F# is the .NET functional programming language. That is not to say that it's a pure functional language. It's not. It's still a hybrid. But sure. The functional needle is sort of most of the way towards functional, whereas with C# it kind of sits in the middle. C# supports both paradigms largely equally, and that's a deliberate design choice by the Microsoft team. They have deliberately incorporated functional programming to C#, so we're not doing anything, we're not malforming or misusing the software by writing functional stuff. But F# is designed to be functional first, with some qualifications here and there for when it needs to interact with other code bases and stuff like that. So there's nothing wrong with it. F#'s fine. It's very, very different. It does not use C-style syntax. So problem one is, for better or worse, it uses a radically different style of syntax to C#. Yeah. So C# uses C-style syntax, which has been around since, I'm not quite sure, but a long time. I mean, C is what, 1970s?
I would say probably.
And we call it C syntax, but I know that there were predecessors to C, so I don't know what they looked like. But it's been around for ages, and Java uses it. JavaScript uses it. It's a very ubiquitous. So C# is going to feel more comfortable if you're into getting into a language you want to start doing some functional.
Right.
And it's just not that many people who do F# out there. Now, this is a pragmatic choice. There is nothing wrong with F#. It is a perfectly respectable, usable language which will bring business benefits if you adopt it, in terms of robustness, in terms of the quality of your code base. There is nothing wrong with it. And if my boss were to say that we were going to adopt F#, I'd be the first to start cheering and grab myself a lovely F# book, like Isaac Abrams or something like that. So, but the reality is, purely pragmatically, not that many people do it. Yeah. And I'm aware that this is a vicious circle. It's like not many people do F#, so I'm not going to do F#. So, well, that means that we just keep adding to the problem. And that is absolutely true. I can't deny it. That's the problem. But nevertheless, this is where we are. It's a bit like English is the international business language.
Right.
It's not a very good choice for an international business language. It's quite a terrible choice. It's comparing English spoken to English written is nonsense, and the more you look into it, the worse it gets. Yeah. It's a terrible choice. If I were choosing, I'd go with Italian. Italian's nice. But nevertheless, here we are. This is the language we've got. It's not the best choice, but historically, it's the one we've ended up with. So, okay, I'm biased because I'm an English speaker, of course, but if I were a non-English speaker and trying to decide which language to choose, I'd probably go with English because a good chunk of the world speaks it.
Yeah,
you see what I mean?
To me, these days, you kind of have to learn English, especially if you're going to be traveling. You know,
exactly.
internationally, you pretty much have to know English because you go to these different airports and there's nothing in Chinese, there's nothing in Japanese, or even Spanish really.
Yeah,
It's all English or the native language to where that airport is. That's it, right?
sure. No, absolutely. I mean, I spent a lot of time traveling around, going over to India because my
Mm-hmm.
wife is Indian. She's from Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent a lot of time over there. And India, there is no language called Indian. That's not a language. It doesn't
No, right,
exist.
right.
There's something like 200 native languages or more. There's probably more than that in India. It's a lot.
Yeah.
There's not even one family of languages in India. There's many families of languages which have no relation. The languages of the south do not resemble the languages of the north.
Hmm.
Consequently, the unofficial lingua franca of India is often English.
Hmm. Yeah, it is
Um,
because they were invaded by the British, right? Long time ago.
yeah.
Well, they were invaded by a bunch of people, right? But I mean, I've been to the Indian Gate a couple times, right, in Delhi, and that's where they memorialize the Indian soldiers who died during the their independence fight. I'm not sure what that is
Sure.
called, um, but yeah,
I, I
yeah,
I think they call it the Indian Uprising.
yeah.
Funnily enough, when I was at school, we had a different name for it, which probably needs to be forgotten in the history now.
But getting back to languages, the one thing
Sure.
I want to tell everybody is that, we're talking different languages here, F sharp, C sharp,
Mm.
we have VB.NET, we have lots of different languages in .NET, in the .NET world at least. But the one thing I want to caution people out there, especially the younger developers, is that, you should always use the right language for the job, right? Because one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was, when I first met the people who got into F sharp in the beginning, they were like, everything must be done in F sharp, and I'm going, well, wait a minute, you know, come on, right? I mean, that's not a very good attitude to have, right? If you have things that F sharp really exceeds that, then you should use F sharp. If you have things that C sharp exceeds that, you should use that. If you had things that C++ exceeds that, you should use that, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't try to force a language into something to do something that it's not really meant to do, right?
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. Now, I mean, F sharp is probably at its no, F sharp, just caveating this, F sharp can do everything. You can write full stack F sharp, you
Sure,
100% can.
sure.
But it's probably at its happiest with things like rule bases, like
Hmm.
data transformations. Take this data here and transform it to this data here.
Right.
It's really happy doing that. It does it brilliantly and elegantly and neatly. And you can write a full stack F sharp 100%.
Sure.
But if you were deciding to be pragmatic and split the code base, then you might perhaps write your business logic in F sharp and then
Hmm.
maybe your front end in C sharp / JavaScript / whatever. With the front end's a whole entire topic
Sure.
of conversation these days.
Right. Right.
But that's areas where you have very predictable inputs and results
Hmm.
is the place where functional programming is happiest. It's meant to be programming without what we call side effects.
Hmm.
So things like unhandled exceptions don't occur in functional programming. They're not really a
Hmm.
functional concept. We
Right.
don't have this. We have other ways. We might use the return type in some way. There's something. So one of the things I use a lot is something called a discriminated union,
Hmm.
which is a type which may be one of one or more actual types. So, trying to think of a metaphor again, this is like Schrödinger's type.
Hmm.
Imagine you've got this type called cat. Now, cat is not cat. Cat is actually a live cat or dead cat.
Hmm.
Now, I'll pass it around as cat, but you can't ever open it as cat. It's one of the two types under the surface. And
Hmm.
until you crank the box open to have a look, you don't know what you're actually looking at. You just know it's cat of one of these two types.
Right.
So one of the discriminated unions I often use is called maybe. Now, I use a slightly modified form of it. Maybe usually exists in one of two forms, which is a something, meaning this operation we just tried out worked, and data came out, and here's your data. Have a look. Or nothing, which is something went wrong, or the record went bound, or something, in which case nothing happened. But the fact that I'm a nothing is the signal to you that it didn't work. In which case, by virtue of the fact that it's a nothing, fine, it didn't work, or I didn't find it, or whatever. Now, I've modified this slightly. It's not true to the proper sort of functional theory, but I use something, nothing, and error. So something meaning it worked. Here's your data. Nothing, it didn't. I couldn't find it. So there's nothing to see here, chap. Or error meaning not only did it not find, but actually threw a dirty great error. In which case, here's the error for you to have a look at and then report back to the user that this happened. Now, in F# and in apparently TypeScript does this very well. You can actually have this just out of the box. You can just have a type which has many types, and that's fine. C# doesn't currently have that capability. Now, I have it on good authority. It's being worked on, so we may get this in the future. For now, how I tend to do it is have an abstract base class with literally nothing in it, and then inherit off it to be the different states. So I do something like public abstract class cat, inherit, public class alive cat inheriting from cat, and then maybe it's got like, I don't know, name Tiddles and all the rest of it in there, and then I'll also inherit off that to be public class inheriting from cat, dead cat. Not sure what's in that one. Probably best not thought about. But in the case of my maybe, though, I make it a maybe of T, meaning it's a generic, so I can have in the something I can have a property called value, which is of type T, which means that's my value there wrapped in this envelope. But that's how that works, and that's really useful. It means that wherever there's likely to be an error, most errors occur when you're using this technique at places where you're having to interface with external systems, so web API calls or file lookups or whatever, database lookups. You can put a try-catch around that, and then you can catch the error at that point, and then return the error type as our maybe. In which case, and you could just pass the maybe around as maybe through place to place to place through your code base until it reaches the controller or whatever. I'm assuming we're doing an MVC website at this point. So in the controller, I would see, okay, I've got the maybe out of my business logic class. I don't actually know what it is, but at this point, I'm going to do a switch expression to say, which type is it really? Because now I have to report to the user, and now I care what's inside the box. So I'm going to flip it open, see what I've got, and then based on what I've got, I'll decide what to do. And it'll collapse this 3-state possible thing into a single state string of some sort. Now the string might say, it worked, here's your data, or couldn't find it, or error, here's your error message. That's probably the sort of what I'd collapse it down into. Something like that. There's other options. And I might even pass a discriminated union down into the sometimes into a view, because then I could do a switch expression or something like that in the view itself. And then the view might know, based on which type it is, how to render itself. This sort of thing probably works better in something like React or something like that. But you get the idea, though. It's a very... Otherwise, your alternative is either return null when you couldn't find the record, and I find that very unhelpful. Because now I'm going to do a null check. No, I don't like that. It means now I'm going to do a null check. It also means I don't actually know what the problem was, because I've no idea. All I know is it's actually this null represents one of the two possible states in my maybe, nothing or error, but I don't know which one, and I don't have the error. Your other possibility is you create yourself a great big metadata object, which has got my data, an error message, various other bits of metadata about the operation itself, and some sort of Boolean or enum, which tells me of the fields here, which ones to actually bother looking at. And you can do that, but it's messy. It's messy and ugly, and it means passing around more properties than you actually ever need to look at. And this breaks at least one of the solid principles, I believe.
That, I've been seeing a lot recently, like this year, and maybe before that, people are really not liking the whole, having to do try catch everywhere to see if there's an error that happened, right? And, when I started, especially with .NET, that's the way we did stuff. If it didn't work, you threw an exception. That's the way it worked. But, a lot of people don't like that these days. And so this year I created for my open source project, I created a result type called simple result, which basically has the type and if there were any errors, basically. And I think there's is success or something like that on it. And I've only used that a couple times in my open source project, mainly for the methods that are doing a bunch of things like copying files, right? You might necessarily not want to stop the process just because there is one problem, right? You want to keep moving on and things like that. And so I did create that. I'm not sure how much I'll actually end up using it, but I think I did that because Microsoft doesn't have something like that. It doesn't have like a result type in .NET, right? That we can do that, and but at least with my open source project, I've been switching from mostly, if nothing is coming back, like for a collection, right? I just send back an empty collection now instead of sending null, right? So I'm even making changes in my code to be more friendly to, the calling code, right?
Yeah. Now that's another method by which kind of touches on the idea of functional programming, because functional programming tends to favor list-based operations. So anything that involves an enumerable, basically.
Yeah.
So link, because link is, little secret here, link is based entirely in the functional paradigm. It was designed deliberately to be modeled after the functional paradigm. There are a couple of concepts in functional are things like higher order functions, which is passing functions around like variables, and with your link expressions, you pass functions in as they're arrow functions, but they're still functions. That's a functional concept. And immutability, which is that once you've created something, you can't change it. And if you do a select statement, it's not altering your base array. It's creating a new one based on the old one, using a function to apply the changes element by element, and that's a very functional method. So if you treat everything as soon as you can as a list-based operation, then certainly things get much friendlier when it comes to the possibility of null exceptions, because an empty array and trying to do a select on an empty array will just do nothing.
Right.
It won't error.
Right.
It's not going to error on you. There is no null exception to worry about.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's working right, but at least it won't have. So, as I say, this is code without side effects. So, when you write functional code, it is always supposed to go from the top and then go down to the bottom, and that's it. We don't have this idea of sort of branching off into these little areas of subcode and or loops or anything like that. It's just start at the top, go down to the bottom.
Yeah.
So with a series of link statements, you can do exactly that. And I write a good deal of my code transformations entirely in link, because link is brilliant.
Oh,
It's got a lot more features than most people know about. Try look at things like zip and aggregate and stuff like that, and you can do some really wild things with it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I've always liked link ever since it was introduced way back in, what was that, .NET 3 or something like that?
Thereabouts, yeah. I think it sounds about. I think that's right.
Yeah, I've always really liked, because, especially back then, especially when I was teaching it at the university. Sorry, I'm looking at my side of my face disappearing. Back when I was teaching it, I liked it because it's one query language for all kinds of different data types, right? And that's the thing that's appealed to me. And depending on the data you're getting, you might have to change how you write the link to do better queries, right? Like when NED framework came out, in the beginning, I was using it when it was still in beta, and I spent a lot of time, switching my link queries and then seeing how that would translate into the query plan in SQL Server, right? And I could make little changes in my query to make the actual, SQL faster, right? 'Cause especially in the beginning, the link to a SQL wasn't the greatest in the world. It's a lot better now, but it wasn't that great in the beginning. And so I spent a lot of time looking at that. And so, but I really like link a lot.
Oh, definitely. And like I said, if you do a lot of link, then you are definitely doing functional programming. Because it is. That is fundamentally how link works. So functional programming is effectively an attempt to take the rest of C# and pop it into link and do everything in that style. So with the, I mean, the other thing you do with your discriminated union. So imagine I've got my discriminated union, my maybe. We often have a function hanging off it called bind or map. I've seen it called a few things. The one downside to functional is that someone's going to have to correct me on this at some point, but as far as I'm aware, there is no great big book of these are all the terms and their precise meanings and their precise names. So you tend to see a lot of the same names appearing again and again, but you will also see some variation. I've seen the maybe called a few different things as well. But anyway, the bind or the map or whatever is kind of something that hangs off the maybe, and you use it to transform an old previous step of a maybe into a new. So imagine it being like a select statement. And, so they've got this thing hanging off, and you put an arrow function in it. But instead of operating on an array and individual elements in the array, instead it operates on the whole object. So if you've got, a string, and you pop string into a maybe, and then you call bind, then you can say x arrow, x.length or something, and now the new maybe that you've just created has got an integer in it. This is a monad, by the way, in case you were curious. That's what they are. Monads are a sort of relay race of functions where each runner is like a function, and they take the result from the previous person and then do something, and then whatever they've created from the previous one, they pass on to the next runner, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a little more to it than that, and I'm not bothered to go into that now, but that's effectively what a monad is. And it just means that you don't have to have things like intermediate variables to store each step, or you don't have to take this one variable and keep modifying it. You don't do any of that. Just like call bind, transformation onto the next bind, and so on. The example I give in my talk is how to transform Fahrenheit into Celsius. Like by first bind is like multiply by, I can't remember, it's like deduct 32, and the next one's multiply by 9, and so on. And bit by bit, you're transforming each step based on the last one. So there you go. Monads.
So since we're getting close on time, I wanted to ask you, especially for those of people who haven't really done functional programming, including myself, too much. I mean, except for what I do already in C#. But so what are your like top 3 benefits of functional programming?
Okay, top 3 benefits. It's much more concise than OOP alternatives. It can be, depending, I mean, we're comparing apples with oranges in a way, but it could be a third to a half the length of OOP code. Now, it's not just more concise, but it means that consequently it is easier to understand quickly what the code is doing. It also tends to encourage good code structure. So it's easier to maintain, easier to modify. This might sound controversial, but it is actually easier to learn. Now, it might be harder if you spent a long time working in OOP and are very familiar and comfortable with OOP, but actually there are fewer things to learn in functional compared to OOP. So if you're starting from literally nothing straight out of university or whatever, you might well find functional easier to learn than OOP. It's more robust. It fails less. When you've got like the concept of the 3-state maybe that I use, like the unhandled exception doesn't occur, and you can use the bind we often put some secret magic into that where it says check, we're passing a function in to be executed, but before we do that, let's just check to see whether there's a null exception possible. Then let's just not do it. You can kind of make all of the unhandled null exception just go away. So it's more robust. It tends to fail very, very much less. Now, in C#, you can't actually fail it impossible. But in pure functional languages, supposedly, it's possible to make it so that unhandled exceptions crashing your code is impossible. Could well be true. It's also much more testable, as another one. You can get close to 100% testability. We work on the principle of creating small functions with predictable results and no side effects. So you can test those very easily and effectively. So that's another one.
Yeah, that's predictable results is one thing I wanted to make sure you said, because that's at least in software engineering, that's the whole thing we're trying to strive for, right? And doing that with a lot of languages, including C#, is not very easy, or if it's impossible, basically, right? well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's a lot more difficult, right? And and for me, especially the apps that I use, I can see all these problems where, like this morning, I was trying to copy. I downloaded the source code for .NET, and I was trying to, copy that folder from the zip, archive into the folder I keep it in my machine. I tried twice and it wouldn't work. It just stopped at some point, right? And
Right.
I reboot my machine because it froze up Explorer. Reboot my machine, tried again, did it again. And right before the show, I had to reboot again, because I was trying to get that done before the show started. And it's just stuff like that just, I don't know about you, but it just irritates me that, it worked one way today, but tomorrow it works completely different.
Yeah. No, I mean, to a degree, that's always a possibility. I mean, there is, if you're really desperate to put some programming flaws in your code, then functional will eventually let you do it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the sort of very basics, the sort of common everyday stuff, like I said, the null reference or something like that, those problems fundamentally go away if you write in a functional style.
Yeah.
Now, we can't get there 100% in C#, and we're never going to get there 100%, but we can get pretty close.
Yeah.
You could certainly massively reduce the amount of possible error in your code base by adopting a functional style of coding.
Yeah. And, even though, I kind of grew up in this world throwing exceptions to indicate that something as bad has happened, right? Throwing exceptions and trapping exceptions is very costly, as far as, coding goes. And you kind of don't want to do that unless you have to, because it does really does affect performance, right? Because there's a lot that happens when an exception happens. And it really drags down your performance dramatically. Yeah.
And it's not just that, but also, unless you're careful, you don't necessarily know where the catch is going to be.
Right.
Unless you've deliberately modeled your try catches to stick as close to where you know the error will be as possible. A try catch is the equivalent of just like throw a rock in the air and it'll land where it lands. I've seen errors that have occurred because an error occurred down at level 3 or 4 of the code base, which was caught back up in level 2. And now there's a whole load of code after that assumes that a lot of steps have been done that haven't been because the unhandled exception occurred. Well, the exception occurred, which was handled, throwing us to a later point of the code.
Right.
Now,
no, you're right.
With these sort of predictable one direction of flow style functional code, that doesn't happen. That can't happen.
Yeah. So, I think I told you at the conference, and I apologize I haven't done this yet, but I'm definitely putting your book on my shopping cart in Amazon, because I really do want to learn how to do this, to do what you were showing at the conference, in my own code. And I recommend everybody out there too, of course, to pick up a copy of your book. And but I definitely am, because I don't buy many books, but these days, but I'm definitely getting this one because I really did enjoy your talk in Lithuania, and I thought it was really eye-opening to what you can do, with C#.
Oh, thank you. And I have tried to take the gentle slope approach, because there's this sort of idea out there in the ether that functional programming is hard and difficult and strange and complex, and I'd argue it isn't. But I have tried my hardest in the book to start with code that looks as easy and familiar and normal as possible, and then slowly, piece by piece, introduce functional concepts. So I'm hoping that I never lose anyone along the way. Plus, I've always put an emphasis on, even if it's an early chapter, you can use this right now. It's always got an eye to, let's be practical and write production-ready code. So you stop at the point that you want. If you don't want to descend all the way down to the very last level of the course, it's fine. Stop at the level you're comfortable with. Pick up what you've got. You've still got some stuff that you can use in your everyday code. That's the approach I took.
Yeah.
And please do buy my book because
He needs to pay for his kids' Christmas gifts.
yeah. If enough people buy it, I might almost have enough for a new pair of shoes by the end of next year.
Yeah, we don't make much money selling books, do we?
No, but I didn't write it for the money. I wrote it because, I really enjoyed writing it, and consequently, it is also a very silly book because I wrote it, and I mostly wrote it between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. because that's the only time that the house was quiet.
Yeah.
So it is, because I'm sort of half crazy with tiredness, the book is pretty random, but the technical content I think is pretty solid.
Yeah, I used to, in my early book writing days, because I came out with my first book, I think in 97, I think. And, and after I moved here where I do now, I remember, especially, that, once you sign the contract with a publishing house, you have a very short time to write the book, right? It's typically 3 months or something like that, and I remember, every night I would come home, I'd eat dinner, and I'd be on my computer till like 1 or 2 in the morning drinking Dr. Pepper. I think in one of my books, I actually gave credit to Dr. Pepper because it was the only thing keeping me awake to write the dang book. Now I can't do that at all anymore. I mean, I never work past, 1700, military, the time that you guys say it, 1700, 5 in the evening, right?
No, I know we use 24-hour time as well.
Yeah. And I just can't do it anymore. I'm just been around too long, I guess.
Unfortunately for me, I have a day job, so I can't be working on my book in those hours. Plus, of course, I've got the children to deal with after that.
Oh, that too. And, yeah.
They expect to be fed up to 3 times a day. And all the rest of it, and my wife would quite like it if I spent some time with her once in a while as well. So it kind of leaves me with the small hours of the morning. Occasionally, sort of like typing away and like falling asleep. I wasn't asleep. That was the process for about a year. Took me about a year to write the first draft, and then about another 6 or 7 months of sort of rounds and rounds of editing. So nearly 2 years it's taken me to write this thing.
Yeah, the editing is a hard part too of doing books. When you're working with an editor, at least it's it's going, I already finished it. No, you got to do some more on it. I'm done. I'm moved on.
Yeah, there was a lovely interview once I saw with George Lucas of all people, where he was talking about the process of films coming out, and he said films don't get finished, they escape. And I can kind of appreciate that. It's like I could have carried on tinkering with the book forever.
Oh yeah.
But at some point, I've just got to say,
you have to say stop. Right.
It's done now. It's done now. Okay, it's not perfect, and as I found out by the errata that's pouring in, there are certainly some not horrible major issues, but I've still got plenty of spelling mistakes and all that. I thought we'd caught them all, but but eventually, at some point, you have to say this is done now.
Yeah. Because even when I go through my books now, and it doesn't matter how many times I go through it, I always find something that probably could have been done better, or a mistake or something, right? And you're right. You have to say, okay, there's a couple mistakes. I tell people at the beginning of the book, if you find anything, let me know. I can fix it. But I can't catch everything, especially since I do everything myself now, right? Because I don't work with a publisher anymore, and that's even harder.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give credit to the editors that they found me at O'Reilly are really nice people, and goodness me, they did a very thorough job. But even then, like I said, no one can catch everything. No. I mean, maybe if I'm fortunate, there'll be a second edition at some point, and that'll probably have a few fixes in it, but or new ideas that occurred to me. I mean, the other problem, of course, is that tech moves fast,
so quick,
and like I tried to get it up to date with with the C# 12. But, give it a year or so and the book will be out of date because the C# 13, 14, whatever will have come out. And my book will not be out to date with that. I don't think it'll be horribly out of date. But, we're getting a wrap-up soon.
Yeah. Well, that's actually... Simon wants to go to bed. Yeah, that's actually why... That's actually why I don't put a version number on the cover of my books anymore. Because if you do that, it'll kill your book sales the second the next version is announced. right? And
yeah.
so I don't do that anymore. It's in the description of the book, but not on the outside of the book, at least. Yeah, we got to go because it's late for Simon. It's like 12:30 there or something like that. In
Where is he?
He's in India. He's
Oh,
yeah. This is run out
very
of
nice.
Delhi. Yeah, this show is run out of Delhi. So
Oh,
yeah, so it's
nice.
late for him. Luckily, he's young. So it's not too bad. But anyway, I should let you go. Thank you so much for being on the show. I definitely want to have you back on. Buy Simon's book so he can pay for Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
And it's been enjoyable having you on the show. And I really do look forward to reading your book when I get it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so
I
much.
shall see you next time.
Yes, next time. Thank you. Well, that was a great session with Simon Painter. Like I said, Simon, I met him at the 2 conferences I spoke at this year. And I really enjoyed getting to know him and attending his sessions. And I can't say that for a lot of people, but I can for Simon. So make sure you get a copy of his book and learn how to do some functional programming. It won't hurt your code. It'll make it better, I'm sure. So I'm going to learn it. So I always need new skills. Well, we always need to learn something, right? All right. I hope you will help me help the kids in India, of course. We were just speaking about India. You know, I raise money for the Voice of Slum. They're a wonderful NGO that I've got to visit twice, and I even got to introduce Dave and Chandy there at the CSharpCorner conference last year. I really, Dave and Chandy are 2 people that really, really do inspire me, and they do a wonderful job for these kids, not only giving them schooling, but giving them clothing and food and school supplies and all these kind of things. So most software engineers have the ability to give back, and so I hope you will join me in giving back to the Voice of Slum by going to thevoiceofslum.org and donating whatever you can. I know they'll appreciate it. Last year we delivered 5 computers to them so the kids can learn how to use computers and also learn in general. So it was a good time. So I'm on the wrong screen. All right, sorry, my slide is out of date because of freaking Outlook, not Outlook, OneDrive and Office. So the next show is not December 16th with Simon. The next show is actually, let me look. It's sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough. It's actually on the 13th of January with Leslie Richardson. She's been on the show before. She's from the Visual Studio team at Microsoft. I wanted to have her on before the end of the year, but she had to reschedule, so she's going to be the first of the year. So I'm really looking forward to having Leslie back on. As always, make sure you help your fellow human by going and donating blood at your local blood bank. 2 days after Christmas, I'm going to be doing the study that I've talked to you, where I'm strapped down to a machine for 2 hours and donating in a study that's extracting white blood cells that they use to treat seriously ill cancer patients. And with some of that cancer completely going away with this treatment. So I'm really happy to be participating in that study, even though it's kind of a pain. Because I want this treatment out publicly because it's going to save so many people's lives. And I can't wait for that to happen. All right. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Please spend some time with your friends and family. Please be safe. Drive safely. Don't drink and drive because I want you back on the show. I'm sure Simon does too at the beginning of the year to watch another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World. And also please email me suggestions on the show, what you want to hear, who you want to hear on the show, or anything else you want to talk to me about. Send me an email at dotNetDave@live.com. And with that, I'll see you in 2024.